Hello, I'm Dr. Susan Lange from the Meridian Center for Holistic Medicine, and I'm here today to interview Gary Stuart, who is a certified facilitator of Bert Hellinger's family constellation work, and he has written a book called Many Hearts, One Soul, and it is an American perspective on the work of Bert Hellinger, edited by Gary Korb.
Yes.
Yes. So first, I would like to know who Bert Hellinger is and why we would be interested in this American perspective.
Yes. Bert Hellinger has developed the constellation modality to access the invisible dynamics and hidden realms in our family systems. So the life force is carried by energy between generations, and we have the opportunity to go into that energetic field of our ancestors to discover something that's not seen, that's propelling different things in our life in a possible positive way or negative way. Most people want to work on the negative ways because the positives are given. And in that, we use surrogates to access the hidden dynamics that's connected to some negative aspect appearing in someone's life. So what we're doing is really transforming the energy from something that's showing up as negative into something positive with unconditional love, which means we embrace it in its totality without judgment.
Great. Well, thank you. I know that lots of people suffer from grief, for example.
Yes.
How would that be worked with this Hellinger work?
Well, what we find when we do the work, we have surrogates representing different elements of our ancestral past or our current relationship. And what we find more than not is there's a grief that was never expressed due to a traumatic event or sudden event, like a sudden heart attack. Everyone is in such shock that shock wave actually travels through time, through 5 generations, because it was too traumatic to experience during the time and place where it occurred. So what we find is that energy of that grief transfers to generations down the line to be dealt with. It can show up in our life as depression, it can show up in our life as fear, but yet it's still alive in the family system, kind of waiting to be transformed. Through this work, through the constellation process, we can transform it on the spot when it shows up.
Wow, okay. What about, we've got other issues here too.
Yes.
Rejection is a very common issue people come to me with, and they're very concerned, and they have done a lot of work with many therapists, and they still feel out of it or lost or different.
Well, with Hellinger's work, you also have to look at both sides of rejection. More than not, when I find people are complaining of that, they're actually the ones doing the rejecting.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's a transformational twist, and just seeing, well, if they're saying they feel rejected, who are they rejecting? There's always a surprise factor in that, and it turns out 9 out of 10 times, I've had many women come to me, I can't succeed in a relationship, the man is emotionally unavailable. So then we'll set up a constellation, either with her father, her grandfather, her mother, her father, whatever the case may have been, and almost 9 times out of 10 it was the women who are emotionally unavailable. And I'm not saying that to demonize women, but in most cases, the woman was suffering from a grief over a lost child and couldn't open up to her husband. Therefore, it appears that she was rejecting her husband, but she was so consumed by grief over a child loss. Then the child reads that as reject the father, and then they start rejecting men in their life, blaming men for the grief their mother felt over a child loss, and it creates a cascading snowball effect.
Wow. So you could spend years in therapy worrying about being rejected, but there's this whole hidden dynamic that's
yes,
underneath
absolutely,
it.
And that's where we go. Luckily, we have psychotherapy and Western medicine to take care of many things. We don't pretend to be psychotherapists or anything. We're more shamanic in nature, that we're going into the energy of the invisible dynamics that are creating behaviors in our life. So I tell people, psychology is like keeping you on the raft, floating on the river of life. What we're doing is we're diving in the water to see what's in the water under the raft. And in that, we see the negative dynamic where they might have rejection issues, grief, guilt, whatever the case may be, and we're kind of cleaning out the pollution in the water so that the raft can sail smoothly rather than being bogged down.
That's a great analogy. Okay, So let's see some other issues. Yes, a big issue, very common, unfortunately, is family secrets.
Yes, and there's
How
lots of
does
them.
that run people's lives?
What we find is that the client will either tell us the secret or I know of this secret in my family, but during the constellation process, we see the secret was actually a cover-up. And the interesting thing is when the secret's good to have that information, but when we start to use the surrogates and track the feeling, the energetic feeling of what the secret represents, we find that the secret was actually a diversion from the real truth. So the great thing about the constellation process is we get to the real truth that the secret was created for. And in that is the release. We've released the energy that created the secret. The secret is not a secret anymore, and sometimes it's a much darker secret than anyone had realized was in existence.
Wow, so give me an example of some of these secrets.
Okay, they can get pretty heavy. I'm trying to think of one. Last night we were doing a constellation, and a woman was working on her mother issue. Her and her mother are always fighting. So we tracked back. Her mother wasn't there. We tracked back through different surrogates to be her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. It showed that her great or great-grandmother was a victim of incest with her father and actually was impregnated by her father. Well, the client, who doesn't even know these people because they've been dead for almost 100 years, but it was so real, and it was very important to state the truth that I have my father's baby. And it ended up showing, now number one, the family went on despite this trauma. The client was there in the room despite it. She didn't even know about it, but it was so real to all the women in the room, and that kept women afraid of men for 4 generations. So that initial trauma, not to endorse it or anything like that, created a mistrust of men. And by the end of the constellation, all the men were sitting down, because the women really couldn't be emotionally available to men. They were kind of judging them in a superior way, but all the women were left standing. And it really showed that it was more of a matriarchal system, and that the women really were the powerful ones in this family system. And what was amazing is the client saw her mother in a totally different light. And she was talking, my mother rejects me, blah, 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 blah. And that fight that was going on just went back 5 generations. It was really a fight between a great-grandmother and a great-grandfather.
Yes, yes, wow. So other secrets might be, hidden murders in the family, or hidden affairs, or hidden children.
Now, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Those are some of the bigger secrets. Now, what we do find with the work is everyone belongs in a family system. Well, if a father has a secret lover and no one knows about it, that woman still is represented by one of the children of the father's immediate family, even if it's a secret relationship. So we find everyone is included energetically in the family system, and everyone belongs, even if it's an illicit affair. And that creates confusion in the children. They don't realize. So say that father has another child, let's say out of wedlock, while he's married to someone else. Well, that adds another person to the family system. So the person who thinks they're the firstborn is actually the secondborn. We're giving a place for that illicit relationships child, and we're giving the child its proper place as number 2 when it thinks it's number 1.
Yes.
So we also find something very interesting with the work is that a lot of people get married. Some marriages are arranged. It's not for love. The parents wanted one family to join another family, but they really love somebody else. That will create a break in loving relationships because the family's not allowed to marry who they love. And the other thing we find is that that woman always has to be represented in the family. So the children will either take on the role of that missing woman, or the true love. People will marry a person and have a family, but their true love was from someone who came before. And it's almost like what we discover in Hellinger's work, when the human heart opens up and loves for the first time, sometimes no other love can match that love. And even though they marry and have 10 children, their heart was always with someone else who's not even in the family system, who no one knows about. So that would be a big family secret that people don't even realize is a secret. my mother or father loved someone else, and yet they married and I received my life from their